Good evening, everyone. This is the October 28th, 2024 meeting of the Town of Barnstable Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. According to whatever Mass General Law is, I have to ask if anybody is recording this meeting, and if so, to make himself or herself known. Hearing none, let's call the roll. Chris, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. Hector.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Not here. Oh, he is here. All right. Lillian is absent. Jim.
Here.
Tom. Absent. Jeremy.
Here.
And I am here.
Great. So we have a quorum. That's excellent. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was September 9th. Do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve the minutes?
Yeah. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion of the minutes?
Oh, that looked fine.
Okay, great. Chris, Jeremy, any comments?
Nope.
The minutes look good to me.
Okay. Good. Well, I looked them over too, and they're fine as well for me. So unless there are any other comments, Chris, will you call the roll, please?
Hector.
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Great. Thank you very much. That's excellent. All right. So moving right along in the agenda, the next topic is the discussion of the preparation of the fiscal 2025 financial overview report. We've been through various iterations of this one. The version that we're discussing is version 8, which Mark circulated to all of us a number of weeks ago. And I would propose, unless anyone has any comments on the initial pages, I would propose that we go to page 12, which is the only section to my recollection that was outstanding. Does anyone have any objection to that?
I don't. I'm good.
Okay. All right. So on page 12, we have the looking ahead section. Now we've been around and about on this section for a while. Jim Sproul did yeoman's work in rewording and making the points in the looking ahead section more to the style for CFAC and our responsibilities under the town charter. I did a little bit of shrinking to make it fit, and Mark actually reduced the font by 1 point to 10 to make it fit. I think it's fine the way it is. And again, Jim, thanks very much for putting in the effort. My only comment is I'd like to move the looking ahead section to the left side of the page and put accountable and transparent and the bond rating and the tell us what you think and the committee members to the right side. But other than that, I don't have any comments, but I would welcome comments from anyone else on the committee. Jim?
My comment is I think I like the way it reads now, and I think it speaks well to the way the committee works, that you can get input from people like Jim and incorporate it and end up in a place that I think everybody's comfortable with. So well done to both of you, and it reads fine to me.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Chuck. Jim, did you have any last comments?
No, all I just wanted to share, I did send out, I just put some thoughts on paper to send out to the committee. I'm fine with the way this is. I just just put a few thoughts together, and it's not going to interrupt this session, but just something to think about in the future as we
Okay.
address other areas in our town, just to make sure we're consistent with the administrative code and our skills and expertise.
Right. Yeah, and I got that and I read it, and thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Chris or Jeremy, do you have any comments?
I think thank you also for that email earlier. It got me on a good philosophical questioning of our purpose as a committee, and certainly as a new member. I think that's always the question, is like, what are we doing here? And I think the purpose of this document is really important, and that we're kind of in some ways going beyond what's explicitly stated, which is being helpful for town council and town manager, but trying to be helpful for the broader community as a whole. And I think that's what I loved when I was a Sandwich Finance Committee member, was the fact that we were beholden to the people and less the government itself. So I think the purpose of this document is really excellent. I think it's what we have here closes it out nicely. But I think the main question I started coming with was like, we've done all this work on this. How do we get more people to read it? And I think that was the question I had today, was less about what we have in front of us, which I'm very confident in, and more, what do we do with it next? And how can we as committee members use our positions in town just to spread what we've created in a way that creates some good engagement among the people of Barnstable.
Yeah. So Jeremy, you took the words right out of my mouth. Achieving a broader readership is something that I'd like to touch on once we finish the document. So let's turn to that as soon as we've finished any comments on this. Chris, do you have any comments?
I'm pretty happy with it, so I think it's good the way it is.
All
What's
right.
your reasoning for wanting to swap the columns, like left and right?
Just because the header for the top of the page is looking ahead. So, the eye should, if it's a looking ahead section, I think the eye would naturally look for that. So the left side of the page would be the appropriate side to have it. And then the other stuff on the back is sort of closing material, including tell us what you think and the members of the committee. So that was my thinking.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with that. It doesn't matter to me either way, honestly. So that's fine if everyone wants to do that.
Okay. All right. So I think we can consider this document complete at long last. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and for all of your contributions. It was excellent. Gallery view. Okay, I got everybody back on my screen now. So a couple of we started last year, Jeremy, talking about how to
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we
Please.
need to accept the report, or we're good?
Say again, Chuck.
Do we need to do we need to vote on the report, or we're good?
Yeah, I guess we do need to vote on it. That would be the case, right, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the report version 8 as written, with the exception of moving the looking ahead section on page 12 to the left side of the page?
I'll move.
Seconded.
Second. Great. Chris, would you call the roll, please?
Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Great. Thank you much, everyone. So on the matter of Jeremy's question, which is how we get broader visibility, again, circling back to and I think all of our, I'm going to take a stab and speak for all of us that we want to be a more relevant and committee, not only, as Jeremy says, to the town government, i.e. the town council and the town manager, but also to the citizens, the folks who pay taxes and who support the town government. So I, you know, speaking personally, I'm not satisfied that enough people pay attention to where their tax dollars go. So Jeremy, last year we did talk about a variety of things to get broader readership for this. As with last year, you know, the plan will be, and I think Mark can weigh in on here, that we'll print X hundred copies, and we'll divide up printed copies among the committee members, and then each person will go to his or her area of town and drop off printed copies at libraries, the post office, real estate office, any banks, and any other location where, you know, you have traffic of citizens. But then over and above that, how we get broader visibility for this using digital means. One thing we did last year, Jeremy, was we put a link. We put a little announcement on the left side of the homepage of the Barnstable website that this document was available, and had either a link or a QR code for people to go to access it. Another idea that was mentioned to me today, and Mark, I don't know if we did this last year, but we can use the Barnstable app to it has push notifications. So once the document is final and printed, we can have Lynn Poyant put it, or I guess Lynn or her team put out a push notification that this document is available. Isn't that the way it would work, Mark? And people would click on a link. Is that how it would work? I haven't downloaded the app, so I'm not that familiar with it, but I plan to download it.
Yeah, so that the push notification would send the link out to everybody that signed up under that app.
Right. And then if I'm on my phone and I click on the link, I get a PDF of the document on my phone or whatever device I'm using. Yeah.
Yep.
So did we do that last year, Mark? Do you recall?
No, I don't think we had that app in place last year at this time.
Okay. Okay. And then a third idea I had, and which we discussed last year, and I can't remember why we couldn't use it, but one thought I had was to ask Lynn Poyant to send out an email from the town communication department to everybody who receives the weekly e-newsletter with an attached copy of a PDF of the document. And there are about 8,000 people who get the app. I don't know how many people are on the e-newsletter app. But Mark, can you remember the reason why we weren't able to do that?
Well, I don't think we weren't able to do that. I think the thought being that the link was in the e-newsletter that went out to everybody with a little blurb that, hey, this report's available. Click on this link if you want to access it. So it was, and I think the communications team felt it wasn't necessary to have a separate email when email with the e-news went out to everybody with the link in it.
Right. Well, the question is for the committee is, you know, is this an idea that we want to push? I think Lynn Poyant's response is going to be that her email list is only for the e-newsletter, and so she might not be supportive of sending out something other than the newsletter to that email list. I'm curious to get everybody's thoughts. Jim, do you have any thoughts on this?
I tend to think that that's what Mark's description of the purpose of that email notification. You subscribe to it. It's not a push notification. You actually have to subscribe to receive the newsletter and the contents.
Right.
So to do something different than that would require an ask of the communications manager director to see if they're comfortable, something like that.
Right. Right. The question
we don't want to inundate our subscribers to the e-news with a lot of additional emails either, because if we do that with this report, there's a lot of information in that e-newsletter. We could start a trend where everybody else might start asking, I want a separate email specifically on this particular topic, even though it's in the e-newsletter. And I think that's what the communications department is trying to prevent from happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to recall if I've received just a single subject email from the town on something like that.
I
I
don't
know
think
our
I've,
civic association, but I don't know. The town
yeah,
does.
I don't know that I've ever gotten one. So this would be certainly a break with past practice. The only question is this something that we want to advocate? And I'm mixed. I guess I come down on the conservative side, which is that e-newsletter mail list is just for the e-newsletter. So, and the point would be, as Mark said, that other people would want similar treatment. But if we as a committee thought it was worth talking with Lynn Poyant about, one or more of us could actually raise the issue with her. Chris, do you have a point of view, or Jeremy?
I mean, I think,
I don't.
oh, Chris, yeah.
Well, I don't think it's necessary to have a separate email, with the report. Having it mentioned in that e-news email, I think is fine with a link to the report. I think I raised when we talked about this last year. I know Neil really wanted broader exposure too, and it's fine to do these things, get it out there in front of as many people as possible. But I do think there's kind of a limit to how many people are actually going to dig deeper into the report. Like, it's fine to present it to as many people as possible, but I don't think you're ever going to see broad readership no matter what we do, quite honestly.
Right. I don't disagree. The question is, can we get broader readership and get broader engagement on the part of the residents in financial matters? I agree. It's a tough slog to do, but
So definitely getting the exposure on the town website and in the e-newsletter and just getting it out as much as we can, that's all fine.
Yeah.
And then even maybe like the town TV station, I don't know if they want to do something on the report, one of us can present it, on a segment on the town TV or whatever. That would be another option.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes, I like that idea, Chris. I think we tried to set that up last year, initially talked about it, but it just didn't happen. But I think it would be great to have perhaps the chair of the committee sit down with Sarah Beal or another member of the communications team and have an interview, conduct a 5-10 minute session on, why we do this report, what the report includes, and just a Q&A, and we can put it out there on the public access channel.
Well, I think that's a great idea, and I'd be willing to do it, and I'd be willing to have one or more members of the committee in the interview with me. But that's a good idea. So a link on the homepage and have it remain there for a while is one idea. Have it be included in the app push notification of at least one notification when it's published, and maybe consider asking for a second push several weeks later, just to remind people that it's available. And then a third idea would be to have the link in the e-newsletter like we did last year, and then Jeremy or Chris's idea that we have a short interview on town TV. That would be a good idea as well. Jeremy, do you have other suggestions of ways to?
I was also thinking about the TV piece just being in the high school. We have that studio in there and they do really interesting work. And I think the school would definitely be a good avenue of ways to disseminate information. I mean, everything from having those TV studio, they could even put together a report with visuals and stuff that would accompany an interview. Also with social media, I mean, the beauty of the report is we do have a lot of visuals for data. And I think when it comes to social media, if they're posting like, hey, here's, 10 graphs, and if you want to learn more, that would be another way to engage some people. But I think also it's just kind of us, like we ourselves are the people that know most about this and believe in it the most. And, what are ways like that we can share it amongst. And I think that idea of going into your neighborhood and talking to neighbors, because I think we know the importance of caring about the financial stability of the town. and being able to convey that enthusiasm and knowledge is really our greatest asset of all of these, because
Yeah,
the link is sterile and we can hope people click on it, but if our faces are attached to it and people know that it's just people in their community that are working on this report, I think that also is a huge sell.
right. That's good. So Jeremy, just so it's clear, what we've done in the past is each of us has taken 50 of these documents or so and walked around the neighborhood. I, for example, walked around Osterville. Lillian would walk around Hyannisport and so forth. We would just divvy up territories as it were, and hand copies, put copies in the post office, the local library, real estate offices, and so forth. That's the way we distribute the printed copies.
Yeah, and I'll bring some to the schools because we have these civic action projects that every student legally is obliged to take part in. And part of it's looking at, where is the finances for a town? Like, how do we pay for different projects? If, oh, I want this, how do we pay for it? So I think the schools and teachers would really appreciate copies of the report because they could use it within these lessons. And if we can get kids starting to look at financial health of the municipality when they're in high school, then we're getting them early, which is, I think, really important.
So if we charged you with distribution at the high school, I think that would be the venue. How many copies would you need to have adequate distribution?
I mean, we could use everything from 100 to, I'd say 100 would probably be healthy because we have a ton of different classes. If they need to make photocopies,
right.
Good, and they have certainly the digital copies that the staff
right.
needs. So maybe,
right.
I mean, maybe even 50 hard copies,
50.
and we could go.
Okay. Okay, I think that's a great idea. Do folks have a point of view? Chuck, do you have a point of view on this?
My point of view is I think those are all great suggestions, and I think they get to, at least for me, the metric should be accessibility, availability, transparency, and not necessarily readership. We can't really drive readership other than indirectly. So all these suggestions are going to just make this more available to people, which is, I think, what our goal should be. So I'm fully in favor of all these things, assuming there isn't some resource constraint, either budgetary or personnel, on why we couldn't do something. But they all sound
right.
great to me.
Right. Jeremy, you mentioned social media. If I'm not mistaken, the town has a Facebook page. Isn't that correct? And or the schools? Does the high school have a Facebook page?
Yeah, Barnstable Public Schools has a Facebook. They have an Instagram. I believe the town also has a Facebook and Instagram, and both of those, I think, are. I mean, the schools we know are a big chunk of money. I don't know if the schools will necessarily want to push that out.
Yeah.
But I imagine the town would be much more able to just, hey, here's 10 graphs about our town's finances. Take a look at this link.
Mark, is that feasible in your opinion to put some of this out through the town Facebook page?
Yeah, I'll contact Lynn, talk to Lynn about it, and see what she can do or recommends as far as putting it in through the town. As Jeremy said, we have a Facebook page and an Instagram page for the town of Barnstable.
Right. I don't know about
I
don't know about Instagram. I'm not really, I don't really use it. So but these are all great ideas.
You can put it on Twitter too. There's a Twitter account for the town of Barnstable.
Yeah. All right. So Mark, maybe you can reach out to Len and tell her that I'll give her a call. I'm happy to undertake on behalf of the committee a conversation with Lynn, and anyone else who wants to join me on that call or on a meeting with Lynn, I'd welcome that.
Okay.
So maybe, so if you could just reach out to Lynn and let her know that I'll be getting hold of her, and I'll send around an email when we have a date to meet with her. And then if anybody wants to join me, he or she should feel free. All right. And then I guess the last question is how many to print? I think the upshot of this conversation is we might want to print an increment more than we printed last year. Last year, Mark, I think the print run was 300, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
So I would,
I mean, from a bottom up basis, I can tell you in Katuitt, I put them in the library, the post office, and the coop. And I go back and check 10 days later. And if I've, dropped 50 or 60 among those three places, they're all gone within a week. So just FYI. So 50 or 60 in Katuitt seems like a reasonable number.
right. So if we think of the 7 villages, at least 50 in each, plus an additional increment for the high school, maybe 400 or 500, if we have the budget, Mark, to do that.
Yeah, I'll have to get a quote from the printer for
Okay.
the 500 copies and see. I mean, the printing costs are going up.
Yeah.
And our budget is not. So we'll have to get a quote. I'll let you know if we can afford that many, or if we're
Okay.
stuck with 300 again, like we did
Yeah.
last time.
I would push for at least 400, but get a quote for 500. Sometimes if they have a larger print run, the
Yeah.
per copy price goes down significantly.
Mhm. We will
Okay.
do.
All right. That sounds great. Chris or Jim, any parting comments on the
Want to ask about
distribution method?
QR, just want to ask about QR codes. Would it be, for maybe even for Jeremy in the school to have a poster board with the QR code for the report itself? I mean, that might be just as efficient depending on how people operate.
Yeah, I could, it seems like it would be interesting to have, like you said, if there was a little stand of, hey, grab a paper copy, but also there's a sign there that has a QR. So if in the case they're all gone, someone would just scan that as they're out and about.
So it would be like a poster board somewhere,
Yeah,
Yeah,
just a
or
little
on it.
8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It's real, just firm, and then you have the QR code on it. Take your phone and with the camera, take a photo of it, and it takes you
Right.
to
This could go on a bulletin board, one or more bulletin boards, Jeremy.
Exactly. Like if there was instead of just a stack of the reports at the post office, just hanging below it was a QR code. If that stack disappears, then you could just scan that, or if you don't want to take one, but you want to get a digital copy, just a little a one sheet of paper that you could hang up in those locations we're dropping them off as well.
Well, that's a great idea. Maybe we can, Mark, I mean, I'm happy to take a crack at developing sort of that 8.5 by 11 sort of ad, but maybe the communications department could help with that.
Yes. Yeah, because the communications department will have to create the actual website page where you can access this report so that the
Right.
QR code can then be linked to that. So yeah, we
Right.
can work with the communications team to put that together. So that could be
Okay.
part of the conversation with Lynn.
Great, good idea. Great. All right. Well, that's really all I had on the issue of broadening the visibility, and I think everybody's comments were excellent. And Jeremy, I especially liked your idea of at least trying to galvanize some interest in the schools. That would be excellent.
Yeah, and I think there's an appetite for more avenues of ways to engage with the municipal government in the high school, and I certainly was working with a lot of departments. The reason I joined the committee was kind of my last year's work with the town, so I'm hoping that this can definitely be part of that better engagement with students with municipal. So I think it fits
Right.
perfect.
Okay. All right, good, excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for all of that. I would propose that we move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Excel model, the CWMP financing analysis. The version that I have on my computer screen is, I think, Mark, you circulated back in mid-July. Mine is dated July 18th. And we touched on this a little bit at our September 9th meeting, and you can see in the minutes that we've approved, there are various points made on this model. So again, from the chair's perspective, I think the model is it's sufficiently detailed and sufficiently conservative to serve its purpose, which is to help citizens and especially the town council assess whether we have the appropriate mix of revenues to support the CWMP project over the next 5 years. In our September 9th meeting, one of the topics was, suppose the $16 million wasn't there. Suppose New England Wind 1, the contribution is not made for some reason, that project doesn't move forward. That New England Wind 1, just so everybody knows, is the landing of the second offshore wind project at Craigville Beach. It was formerly called Park City Wind, and I believe the project name is still Park City Wind LLC. So from my perspective, it's a reasonable model. My only comment is that it covers the next 5 years, and pretty soon we're going to be into another round of budgeting, and how relevant will the model remain? It would need to be tweaked to reflect the fiscal years 26 spending, fiscal year 26 through 30. But and then also at the last meeting, people talked about, suppose there's an economic downturn, how would that impact the model? Or there's a catastrophe of some sort, like another pandemic, how would that affect the model? And I think we could go through an exercise of trying to game out what the numbers would look like, but I think I'm not sure how productive that kind of analysis is. I think it's more productive just to scrutinize each of the assumptions, and then possibly to look at the model if the 16 million one-time payment from the New England Wind 1 project did not occur for some reason. But I'm interested in other comments.
I wanted to ask Mark just a general question. When we used to do, modeling in the private sector, we would basically say the goal of the modeling is to identify, basically the two tails and everything in between. And then you could come up with a weighted scenario if you wanted to, but it was mostly like, what's the absolute best case and what's the absolute worst case? And is the model that we built appropriate for determining kind of the span of outcomes we could see, rather than saying, this is the one we think is going to, the highest probability of occurring, or this is the weighted average, or however you want to say it. Is that, I agree with Hector's point that to me, it's more about, does the model and its components and the way it works make sense, rather than actually modeling something. And I just want to ask if I'm thinking about this right, or if that's just a bad frame to come at this. Now I'll go back on mute.
Yeah, so thank you, Chuck. I think, I've tried to cover all the components in this model that I could think of. And if I've missed anything, and if any committee member thinks that we should be taking a look at another component that perhaps is missing, let me know. But I remember you mentioning this at the last meeting at a meeting in September. And so I tried to do kind of like the two tails. I looked at what I thought was perhaps a best case scenario, which was kind of like on the conservative side, really, it's just the original one that I presented to the committee. That's assuming everything goes forward, no economic recession, Park City Wind payment comes in. We have some growth in local meals and rooms tax revenue, investment revenue continues the way it is. And then I tried to take a look at a worst case scenario. What if we had another pandemic and we saw a similar type of revenue contraction. And I ran 3 different models, and I sent them out to the committee in an email back on October 2nd. I don't know if you've all had a chance to take a look at those 3 different scenarios or not.
Mark, I didn't recall that, getting that on October 2nd, but let me look.
Yeah.
October, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so 3 scenarios. Anyway, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, so the scenario 1 would be like, the best case scenario, what I've presented to committee right now. This assumes, again, everything's going forward. We still have growth in revenues. And the second scenario that I did was, Hector, you had asked, what would happen if we didn't have the $16 million host community payment from the Park City Wind project. And so
Right.
I took that out, and what that illustrated, and that was the only change that I made. And what that illustrated was that, okay, if we lost that revenue source, then it would have to be replaced with something else naturally. And so what I replaced it with was an increase in the general fund contribution, and that would require another $250,000 a year through fiscal year 32 in order to keep this financial model in a positive position. And so that was the trade-off. If we don't get the Park City Wind payment, then we're going to have to continue to increase the general fund contribution for this program. And then I took it 1 step further, and I said, okay, what if we lost the Park City Wind payment? We had another economic downturn, whether it's a pandemic or just a recession, and we saw revenue contraction like we did during the pandemic. What would that look like? And under that scenario, which was scenario 3 that I sent out, we would have to replace all that lost revenue with more general fund contribution, right? Because where else is it going to come from? And so what that would mean is that we would have to continue with that additional $250,000 a year through fiscal year 38. So, we're looking at another 13 years of additional general fund contribution, to the point where we would be providing $8,250,000 a year in general fund tax support to implement these projects listed in this 5-year plan, FY25 through FY29. So, that's kind of like the worst case scenario that I could think of. No growth in lodging tax revenue, meals tax revenue, vacation rentals, actually a reduction for a couple of years in that revenue, but then it would come back and rebound like it did after the pandemic. I assumed a lower interest rate on investment returns, because interest rate
1%. Yep.
Interest rates would probably be cut. I assumed better borrowing rates for general obligation bonds, because those rates would probably go down. And I assumed lower inflation as a result of that, because there'd be more competition for work. And last recession we had back in 2008, 2009, we saw prices on construction contracts actually go down. But I still kept in a 2% inflationary rate here. So, I tried to look at it from that lens, as suggested by the committee the last time we had this conversation. And yeah, that's where we're at. But if you think there's some other assumption that perhaps we should include, let me know and I can work it into the model. But as Hector pointed out, this only deals with the next 5 years of capital projects.
Right.
Next
year, including the current fiscal year.
Including the current fiscal year, 25 through 29. So we're gonna have to add another year to this model. Okay. When FY30 we're gonna get 26 through FY30, getting some updated numbers for 26 through 29, and then we're gonna have a new year, FY30, added to this. So we'll have to update this. We plan on updating this every single year, so that we always have a rolling 5-year model, reflecting the most current cost estimates from Department of Public Works.
So for me, Mark, thank you for that. Then my quick response is, I could not think of any other variables, meaningful or otherwise, that you should incorporate into the model you sent around for the purpose of constructing these scenarios. So I don't have anything to it didn't seem like anything we could debate each of the variables that's in there, but introducing new variables, I didn't come up with it.
Right. I agree with what Chuck said. Mark, I did have one question on scenario 2. If the 16 million, does this, if you remove the 16 million one-time post-community payment for Park City Wind, did you also, would that not imply that the project itself was not built? So did you also diminish or reduce the personal property tax revenue that would be coming from the infrastructure that was not put in, was not constructed?
No, we already have an appropriation for the northern section of that project, Hector.
Right.
The $31 million appropriation. So yeah, I kept that. I kept the project cost for that in place. I don't have the cost yet for the southern section.
Right, but my question is, if the 16 million goes away, one of the reasons might be that the project, for some reason, is canceled. And if that's the case, then the personal property taxes that I believe are assumed in this model, some of those would go down, right? Because the infrastructure and the power station.
No, I don't think it will, because if the $16 million host community payment doesn't happen, we're still building the northern section of that project.
Right, I understand. I understand we'd have the costs, but the revenue in the model includes personal property taxes from the Park City Wind infrastructure, doesn't it?
No,
No?
it does not.
Oh, interesting.
No, it includes a general fund contribution. Yep.
Right.
We'll have to, and we're still going to, whether it's, tax revenue from Park City Wind or no Park City Wind, we still need more general fund contribution to build that northern section.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, this model doesn't assume any incremental personal property tax revenue from the Park City Wind project.
No, I don't characterize it to that specificity. I only increase the general fund contribution, which comes from general fund taxes. It's not whether it's Park City Wind taxes or the general property tax levy. I don't identify the particular taxes that go to this program. The property taxes are fungible. They go to the general fund and then decide where they go. I don't say property taxes from this particular taxpayer go to this project. This taxpayer go to that project.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. That's just yet another example of how this model is conservative, because if you were trying to goose the model, you might throw in an extra $1 million or $2 million a year from personal property taxes from the project, but you're not doing that.
No.
That's good. Okay. Well, then other comments from the committee, Chris, Jim, Jeremy?
I don't have any.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everything in the model seems like it makes sense to me as scenarios that we would want to put on there. So I think as a model to recommend to town council, I would certainly recommend it without any hesitations.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Chris?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great model, and you guys kind of covered any lingering questions. So I think I don't have anything to add, to be honest with you.
Okay. So Mark, you mentioned that we'll be tweaking this model every year with the new budget round. So what would be the estimated date when in 2025 when you would be able to develop a new model after the new capital budget is approved?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to suggest that because we need to wait to see what gets recommended for fiscal year 26.
Right.
And then I think once we have that number, we can tweak this model. So I would say probably in the last quarter of this fiscal year, we could start working on updating this.
So beginning next April.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I would also just ask, last time when we talked, let me just go to my notes here. Several members of the committee asked about any updates to the Municipal Empowerment Act and any revenues that would flow from that. And I think, Mark, you said at the time that the act had not been passed and there was no visibility into that. Maybe you can give the committee an update on the status of that bill.
Yeah, so the Municipal Empowerment Act did not get included in the passage of this year's state budget. It still sits before the legislature. I'm hoping that, by the end of this calendar year, which is coming up very soon, that they'll have something before the legislature to vote on. If not, we'll see if it gets included in next year's state budget. But they did not proceed with any of those recommendations, so we're not including any new revenues that were identified under the Municipal Empowerment Act in either the operating budget for the town, the CWMP proposal, or a funding plan, or so forth. And so we wait for the state and see what they come up with. So that's hanging out there. I'm not quite sure what the disagreement is, where it's getting, what specific area or areas of that Empowerment Act are causing the delay. I would guess that it had, a lot of it's probably motor vehicle excise and being able to implement that. The motor vehicle excise surcharge, that is something that would affect every single community's tax billing software, and every community would have to get a modification from their vendors, provided from their vendors, to update the software in order to include the surcharge on that bill. And so, and we send motor vehicle excise tax bills out, like semi-monthly throughout the year. So that could cause delay in billing and so forth. So I think that might be one of the issues that they're hung up on, is how to implement something like that. But we'll see. We're waiting to hear, from the state as to, anything that they might do in regards to that act. But
Okay. All right. Well, I think this is a good discussion. And Mark, I think it's, I apologize, I had not focused on your October 2nd email. So I'll go back and look at each of those scenarios and look at the associated spreadsheets for each of them. I guess the last topic would be, what is the committee's view on what, if anything, we should present to town council in conjunction, of course, with Mark. I think several town council meetings ago, I think it was Kristen Turkelson who said that, and maybe Betty Ludke, they both said they wanted to hear from CFAC about this model. So what are people's points of view as to making a short presentation to town council?
Model or the overview?
Just given what I think what the counselors were asking for was CFAC's feedback about Mark's model, and I guess about the three scenarios in an upcoming town council meeting.
Is that something that is interactive in nature, or would we just put something in the minutes saying we reviewed it and we're fully supportive? I'm not sure what the context for the request was. Or they want to have a discussion about it, or they just want to know, yeah, we've looked at it, we're cool with it?
I think it was more the former, Chuck, that they were interested in having one or more members of the committee sit at a table, have it be added to the agenda for a given town council meeting, and for us to give some summary comments and to respond to any questions that councilors had. Mark, is my recollection accurate?
I think what I can confirm with Council Turkelson and perhaps Lucky, I think it was Turkelson though, that requested that we have
Mhm.
CPAC take a look at this model and report back to them.
Right.
Now, I interpret that as perhaps just a written communication from the committee to the council, not a presentation and a give and take with the
Right.
council, future council meeting, but just a report.
Okay.
That you've reviewed this document, includes this and that, and here's our recommendation or advice as to the town council as to the sufficiency of the model or deficiency in the model, whatever it might be. But I think that's what they're looking for is a written report.
Okay. Okay. So do you want to follow up with Counselor Turkelson and ask that question?
Yes.
And to
Well,
my way
actually,
of thinking,
I'll follow up with leadership. I should go through
okay.
council leadership and not, an individual council. I know it's really,
Yeah.
we should direct all of these questions to the council leadership, but I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. That would be great. And I don't know how accessible or available Counselor Penn is given her health issues, but Tamish would certainly have a point of view. He'd be a good one to reach out to. Yeah. Okay. And then we can discuss that at the next meeting. And I think, if it's a written communication, I would just imagine a short memo, a couple of pages from this committee addressed to town council and town manager. And we could all, we could draft something up and vote to approve it and then submit it in written form. If that's the road that they're interested in going. Yeah. Okay. Great. Any other comments on the model and budget? Mark, thanks very much for developing this model and the scenarios.
Welcome.
All right. The next item on the agenda is 4C, update on the financial condition of the town. And here, Mark made a presentation to the joint town council school committee meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. And Mark, you were gonna go through that for our benefit.
Yeah, so I guess I'll ask the committee if I did do a video on this, if you would rather just to watch that video, or if you want to hear me go through this presentation again. We have last Thursday night's presentation that you could watch, or you can have my pre-recorded message that you could watch, or we could do it again here. It's about a 30-minute presentation, and happy to go whatever direction the committee wants me to go in, but if you want me to do the slide-by-slide presentation here tonight, I can certainly do that. What's your preference, Mr. Chair?
Well, it's just after 7 now, and what else do we have on the agenda?
I think this is the last item.
Yeah, my speaking just personally, I always find it helpful, Mark, to hear you sort of page through your presentations. I think it's, I'm glad to know that there's a tape of it. Maybe you could do an abbreviated, not a 30-minute session, but just a shorter version. And then that, for again, speaking for myself, I'll go and watch your pre-recording after this. But what do other committee members think?
My preference would be to hit the highlights, and then if we need to dig into it, can watch the details of the presentations.
Good. Anyone else?
I agree.
I would agree. I was at the town council meeting last night, and Mark did a great job, very in-depth. So I think the highlights, and anyone can look back at that, would be sufficient.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I can certainly do an abbreviated version here tonight for the committee's benefit, and then
Right.
you can go to the other recordings if you want it more detail. All right, so
Great.
let me start there. Let's see.
Are you going to share your screen? Or
Yes, I am.
okay.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Yeah, no, there you
Oh,
go.
there it is.
There we go. Yep.
Okay,
Good.
good. All right. So let's see here. So what I start off with is kind of like referring to our financial report cards, and which we're subject to annual financial audit every year, and we go to the bond market every year to issue general obligation bonds. And we have to get a credit rating assigned to those bonds. And so we get our financials reviewed by a credit rating agency every year. So I kind of look at those two events as an annual financial report card. So the first one being our financial audit. The last one we had finished was for June 30th, 2023. Everything's trending upwards. Our net assets, our fund balances, and our percentage of fund balances versus our expenditures. And so good, clean opinions, no exceptions, no issues with federal grant awards programs, no findings or question costs and so forth. And our current year, our 2024 fiscal year audit is in progress right now. So positive results.
What's the ETA for the current audit?
End of December.
End of December. Okay, so there's a 6-month lag typically.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're actually here finishing up their field work last week.
Okay, good.
Bond rating, same thing. AAA, stable outlook, a very strong economy and tax base, strong institutional framework, history of strong financial performance, strong reserve levels, manageable debt burden, pension and OPEB liabilities in their opinion, and this new factor that they started looking at communities and assessing communities are what they call social and governance risks. And those include mainly things like coastal resiliency efforts. Are you burying your head in the sand, so to speak, and ignoring these things, or are you proactively planning and looking forward, doing some forward looking and implementing projects to address things like coastal resiliency? Being a seaside community, that's a big issue for them. They want to make sure that we're addressing that. And an example of how we're doing that was just done last Thursday night with the Sandy Neck Park relocation project, and the town council appropriating money to do that. So we're proactively recognizing the impact of coastal resiliency and doing things to improve that. So that was credit neutral within our analysis, meaning that they didn't ding us in a negative way for doing nothing because we are addressing it.
Good.
As far as budget performance goes, I won't go over all these numbers, but every single appropriated fund, including our general fund and enterprise funds, all had a favorable budget variance. 12, just to comment on the general fund, the budget variance there was actually a favorable 12.6 million. Even though we budgeted to use 8.2 million to balance the budget, we actually generated 4.4 million. So we had very strong revenues once again, plus some returned appropriations, which resulted in that favorable budget variance. Certified free cash in many of our funds, or 5 of our enterprise funds, all went up. The general fund went down 1.8 million, and that's because we used a lot of general fund reserves or free cash to balance the capital program and the operating budget for fiscal year 25. You guys commented on that in your report. But even though we used a lot, our free cash only went down 1.8 million because we continue to generate free cash to replace what we're using to balance budgets. The large reduction you see here in the sewer enterprise fund is really a timing issue. These projects that get financed through the sewer projects that get financed through the Mass Clean Water Trust require us to spend the money up front, put together the paperwork, submit for reimbursements, and the lag time between the time we expend the money and get the reimbursements is several months. And so that $5 million reduction is a result of that lag time in those reimbursements. We actually received 3 large reimbursements in the months of August and September after the close of the fiscal year, which all but eliminates that $5 million reduction in free cash. So the more real free cash number for the sewer enterprise fund is closer to that 11 million mark where it was before. And if we ever needed to, we could always apply for recertification of that number, providing the DOR copies of those reimbursements that we received. But it's still not necessary to do so. It's just a timing issue. This is just free cash as a percentage of the operating budget. Again, we try to get 50% or more for all the enterprise funds. We're there for all of our enterprise funds. the exception of solid waste and HYCC. And general fund is 15.3%. Recommendations for municipalities are anywhere from 8 to 16%, depending upon the volatility in your revenue structure. Massachusetts community works within that strong institutional framework, meaning that most of its general fund revenue is produced or generated from property taxes, which is a very secure way to fund an operating budget, as opposed to volatile taxes like sales taxes and income taxes. So we're anywhere, it's recommended anywhere from 8 to 16. We're at 15, closer to the high end, well above what the town council's reserve policy is, which is 4%.
Excellent.
Again, reserves, traditional thinking is these are tools to use for one-time expenses or startup funding, or just stabilize rates and enterprise funds, accumulate assets for future liabilities, or to provide for some short-term service stabilization. In addition to that, we're trying to incorporate more risk management thinking in how we use these reserves, because number one being cash flow risk. What are your cash flow risks? When you're a quarterly tax billing community like we are, big chunks of revenue come in 4 times a year, but we have weekly bills that we have to pay and payroll that we have to, biweekly payroll that we have to process. So we have to make sure we have enough liquidity and assess that cash flow risk. So we want to make sure we have enough in reserves that provides us that working capital to meet these weekly and biweekly obligations. We have revenue instability. When you have revenue instability, these reserves also can provide you a softer landing. So in the events when revenue starts to contract, you have reserves to help implement cuts in the future that may be necessary if the revenues continue to decline and they stay down. And then we have uninsured events that could happen from time to time, like large snowstorms, for example, right? You got to have where we can deficit spend for snow and ice removal. And so we have to have cash on hand to provide for emergency response and events like hurricanes or significant weather events, which we can be susceptible to. And then we're always looking at ways to increase our self-insured, whether self-insured assets or activities, because what's happening in the insurance environment out there and trying to get premiums, $1 premiums from insurance companies is getting more and more expensive, and it's continuing to get more and more expensive. So we're doing things like self-insuring ourselves, and what I mean by that is increasing our deductibles for property and casualty losses, for example. And if we have large enough reserves on hand, we can do that to try to keep our premiums down or keep the cost from going up. And when you see significant weather events like that occurred this year in North Carolina and Florida, those impact us all in the northern part of the country as well, because the reinsurance market is taking a big hit on payouts for all of those storm-related events, and it gets reflected in everything that you and I pay on a personal level for our home insurance, and what the town pays to insure its infrastructure as well. This is the free cash that was used to balance the operating and capital budgets. You commented on this in your report. These are some of the other notable reserves that we have on hand. Many of these are, they all serve a purpose. The purpose is identified here. We have sewer construction private way funds. We have a comprehensive water management stabilization fund, which is both for sewer and water. We have a sewer stabilization fund for rate stabilization. We have an OPEB. We're continuing to build those assets for that OPEB liability, and that's up to over $11 million now. So that's a good healthy balance, and we continue to fund or increase the contribution to that every year. And we're self-insured for workers' compensation. That balance is at $4.7 million. So that's a good, strong, healthy balance for workers' compensation. So we have other reserves, but they all serve a purpose. These can't be used with general fund recurring operating costs. Next, I went into the general fund revenues, and I illustrated to the council that the significant increase that we've seen in assessed valuations as illustrated on this chart, where our assessed valuation has gone from about $12.5 billion to almost $25 billion. We've almost doubled our property value in the last 10 years, and that's really on the residential side. That's where we've seen a lot of the growth in assessed values, because the residential market has been extremely strong, especially the past couple of years, post-COVID. And so
Mark, just a question. These are nominal dollars. What do you think in real dollars controlled for inflation this bar chart would look like?
Yeah, pretty close. It would still be in the same direction.
Yeah.
Upward direction significantly. Yeah.
Okay.
Because the property appreciation value has been much stronger than inflation.
Okay. That was my question. Yep.
And really what that does is that the increase in assessed values doesn't mean that we can generate more in property tax revenue, because we're constricted or restricted by Proposition 2.5 when it comes to the tax levy. All it means is that when you have significant increase in assessed values like we've had, it reduces the tax rate. That's why the tax rates are going down, is because the percentage increase in the assessed values are going up at a higher percentage rate than the increase in the tax levy. And so that results in dropping your tax rate. And we expect to continue to see this when we approve the FY25 tax rates. This chart really illustrates that, in that the blue line provides, the percentage increase in the tax levy on an annual basis. And it's been about 3.5 to 3.6% a year. That's 2.5 plus a factor for new growth. And new growth usually adds about another percentage point to what we can raise in the tax levy. So it's about 3.5% a year is what it's averaged. The assessed values have gone up significantly. You can see the percentage increase ever since fiscal year 19 and beyond has been, or FY20 and beyond, has been equal to or greater than the increase in the tax levy. So when that happens, the tax rate goes down. So that's why we continue to see a reduction in the tax rate. And in FY24, we saw a significant reduction in the tax rate. It was close to a 18% reduction in the tax rate as a result of a significant increase in the assessed values during that year. The other thing that the increase in assessed value does is it creates additional taxing capacity for a community. Even though our tax levy, illustrated here in the blue boxes, has gone up from $111 million in fiscal year 16 to $150 million projected in 25, our override capacity has grown even further. But that override capacity can only be accessed with voter approval. So we have grown our override capacity from 218 million to 469 million. So that means that we have significant capacity to increase our tax levy by $469 million, but only with voter approval. And that's really a direct result of the assessed values, because a community is capped at leveling taxes equal to 2.5% of their assessed value. And so that would be, for us, in excess of $600 million a year. So we're only taxing right now at about 22% of what our maximum tax levy could be. And that has gone down. That percentage has gone down over the years. And even though the tax levy is going up, and that's because assessed values are increasing at a higher percentage. New property tax growth has been strong for the past 3 years, for 23, 24, and what we're projecting in 25. We continue to see, a lot of new growth. Vineyard Wind has been a major contributor to that new growth. They have built out their infrastructure now, and it's all on the tax rolls. And fiscal year 25 will be the final year that we capture the last of their growth and that personal property infrastructure that they've built. And they have now become, in FY24, they became one of our top 10 taxpayers with $60 million in valuation. We expect that valuation to come in close to $115 million, almost doubling, as we've got the balance of their infrastructure now on our records. And looking at about 115 million in valuation, making them the third largest taxpayer in town behind Eversource and Cape Cod Mall.
What is the Indian Point family?
That's a residential. That's a residential property down in Oyster Harbors.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a collection. They own three or four, I think, residential properties right next to each other, and so they're all under the same name, and Indian Point. So it's one residential property happens to be in our top 10. This is our state aid trend. As you know, you recall we had significant increases in our Chapter 78 in 23 and 24, which has really allowed us to invest more in our local education system as well as other areas of the budget. But those days are gone. I don't think we're going to see significant increases in Chapter 78 anymore. FY25 illustrated that. We received minimum aid for fiscal year 25, and that's what we're projecting in future years, including FY26, is that we're only going to get minimal increases in Chapter 78. But our total state aid through all categories has doubled from more than doubled from about 12 million in FY16 to just over 30 million in FY25.
Do you expect it to go down, Mark?
No, we don't, unless the state starts having fiscal pressure and they start cutting aid, which we don't see any indication of that yet.
Okay.
But the growth has really been in the Chapter 78, not in any other aid category. Unrestricted aid has gone up around 2% a year, which, as you can see, the color orange on this chart shows that it's about the same size every year. It doesn't go up much.
What's in the other category, if you know offhand?
Yeah, that's like payments in lieu of taxes for state-owned land, veteran and elderly exemption reimbursements. We are reimbursed for some of those exemption costs, things like that.
Okay.
Charter school aid. Local receipt trend has been strong over the past couple of years. Post-pandemic, FY22, 23, 24, you can see that our local receipt revenue has grown from about 20 million in FY21 to almost 30 million, nearly 10 million in growth in that time period in our local receipts. And most of that has been in the motor vehicle excise category and investment income. And those are illustrated by the colors of blue and orange on this chart. Now for 25, we used about $6 million less than what actually came in FY24 to balance the FY25 budget. So what does that mean? Well, if revenues continue to perform well and they come in fiscal year 25, similar to the way they did in fiscal year 24, we should generate $6 million of surplus, replacing what we used to balance the FY25 budget. And so we'll be in the same position as we were this year when we get our free cash certified, because we generated as much as we used. So we'll keep an eye on the FY25 revenues. Nothing yet has indicated that we won't hit our FY25 budget estimates, or that we'll take in less than we did in fiscal year 24. But the big number there is that motor vehicle excise tax. We took in almost $10 million in fiscal year 24. The big commitment comes out January every year, so we'll know better when we receive that information from the Department of Motor Vehicles and what that number is going to look like for fiscal year 25. A couple of other indicators on the local economy are meals taxes and rooms taxes. This chart illustrates our meals tax revenue over the last 10 years. You can see it took a dip in 20 and 21 post-pandemic, but then it came strong, roaring back in FY22 and 23 and 24 to the point where it's over $2 million a year. We're projecting meals tax revenue close to $2.2 million in fiscal year 25. So it's on the upwards trend post-pandemic.
And this could go higher if that MEA bill is approved.
Yes, it could go higher if the what's it called? The Municipal Empowerment Act. Yes.
Right. But that again, that act gives municipalities the ability to raise their rates, but they have to take that active step to raise the rates.
Requires council approval.
Right.
Rooms tax revenue as well, another component of that. And this chart illustrates, traditional rooms tax revenue and the traditional lodging and vacation rentals. You can see traditional lodging took a big hit in FY21, a little bit of a hit in 20. That's when the pandemic started. And in FY21, that's when it really hit and impacted the traditional lodging industry. But then it came back strong in FY22 and FY23. And then in FY24, we actually saw a slight reduction in the rooms tax revenue on traditional lodging. I think that could be a direct result of what you're seeing happening with the vacation side rentals. And you can see the significant increase in FY24 on the vacation rental side. And we didn't have vacation rental tax revenue until fiscal year 20. That was the first year it was implemented. And then, there was a really strong growth in that in FY21 because during the pandemic, people were more, I think, directed towards vacation rentals than they were to traditional lodging because of all the restrictions that were in place. And then it continued to perform well. And then we had another good increase in FY24, and we're projecting a slightly higher amount in FY25. And on the expenditure side, really the things that drive our general fund expense budget are salaries and wages and the associated employee benefits, because we're a service provider. Most of our, and of course, our services are provided by personnel, and we have $110 million general fund payroll. So every 1% increase in that and salaries generates about $1.1 million growth in operating expenses. And we have all municipal collective bargaining agreements negotiated through FY26, and all but one of the schools' collective bargaining agreements have been negotiated through FY27.
What's the one outstanding school agreement?
I think it's the Barnstable Administrators Organization. It's one of the smaller groups, but the BTA, the large group, the BTA and AFSCME, both of those are under agreement.
And just on that note, what was the increase that was negotiated in the health benefit?
So I'm going to get to that in
Okay.
the
Two
following
slides.
slide, pension assessment.
Okay.
Thank you. Then we have the pension assessment. This pension assessment has averaged about a 5.2% increase a year, or $508,000 over the past 10 years. We're using that as a gauge to what we expect it to increase annually for the next several years. Two things impact the pension assessment more than anything else. And number one is, what is the Barnstable County Retirement Association experience and actual investment returns? The stronger returns that they have, that can reduce our increase in our pension assessments that we receive. And the second thing is, what is our percentage of the overall county retirement systems participate or covered payroll? Because every year we have to send them a report on our covered payroll, and we're about 14.7% of the Barnstable County's retirement system. So that $89 million pension assessment that they have, the annual required contribution that they have to put into the system, we've got to pay 14.7% of that, or about 12.6 million. And if that percentage changes 1 percentage point to 15.7%, for example, that could have a significant impact on the assessment. 1% of $89 million is another $890,000, right? And so it's big money if we are increasing our payroll and all the other participants in the Barnstable County retirement system are decreasing theirs, for example, that could result in us becoming a larger percentage of the county's retirement system. So those are the two most significant things that impact this.
So when it says pension assessment, town share is 12.6 million, that means this fiscal year, we have to funnel 12.6 million in cash to the county system.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. It's not a liability. It's actually cash that we pay to the county.
Yeah, we pay to the county, and the pension system, Barnstable County's pension system is on a funding plan to fully eliminate the unfunded liability by 2037. To do that, they have to continue with this funding plan that currently sets their annual required or actuarial determined contribution to 89.3 million. And that's projected in that funding plan by the actuary to go up 5.8% a year. To continue that funding schedule to fully pay off that unfunded liability by 2037. Health insurance is the other big item. We have a FY25 budget is 13.8 million for active and retired employees. That includes a split of 70-30 for all employees, every department, general fund and enterprise funds. The split now is 70% the town share and 30% in the employee share. In addition to that, the retirees are currently only at 50-50, but there's already been a request from the retiree group to have that looked at, to change it, to make it equal to the active employees group. But that's going to require some time and some action. Every 1% increase in rates can add about $145,000 to our operating budget, and the rate increase for fiscal year 25 was 8%. We participate in the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group, which is a large pool of entities that share in spreading risks from their workforce. It's like the Group Insurance Commission, which is managed by the state. I think there's over 50 entities that participate in the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group, including every town on Cape Cod, district, special taxing groups.
The fire and water districts.
Fire and water districts, exactly. I think the Cape Light Compact, I think, is in there. Library, town libraries are part of it. So, you know, it's an insurance risk pool, and that's the way you try to keep your costs down, right? You enter into a big insurance risk pool to spread that liability, that cost out, and it helps mitigate cost increases on an annual basis, as opposed to the town being out there on its own, insuring its workforce for health insurance with a contract through Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example. So we are part of a large purchasing pool, but still, those rate increases were 8%, significant for fiscal year 25, but that's closer to what we used to see pre-pandemic. We're anywhere from 5 to 7.5% a year, sometimes more than that, outlier years. But I think this 8% is like an outlier, but we won't know until, I think, February, when the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group votes their rate increases for FY26. But there were years where we saw 0% increases during the middle of the pandemic. And that's because health insurance expenditures were actually down because elective surgeries did not take place, and other things. And so the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group wasn't incurring a lot of costs, or as much costs as they normally would. And so they were able to hold with rates as is, and we didn't see rate increases for a couple of years. But we're back to the normal times here, and elective surgeries are kicking back in, and so health insurance expenses are back up, and it's requiring rate increases again.
The former split employee town employee share was 50-50, correct?
Right, 50-50.
Right.
Yeah, and then we had the presentation to the town council and talked about this. This was a tool for retention and retaining.
Yeah.
And plus it gets us in line with our surrounding competition, which are all the other towns on Cape Cod who are offering 70% or better.
Yeah. In a future CFAC, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how the increase in the town employee split has affected recruitment, retention, and the uptake by the employees.
Yeah, I think it's just one tool. It's too early, Hector, because I think what we're seeing is, this certainly helps, I think, with retention.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger challenge that we have is recruitment, and
the
reason why is housing costs.
Yeah.
This isn't enough of a change to impact the cost of housing down here and making it affordable for people to move to the Cape.
Right. Okay.
The other decision, the other balancing act that we have to do every year is, how much of the general fund resources are we committing to the capital side of the program versus the operating side of the program? And as you recall, you've seen a lot of requests for the capital side of the budget every year, to the point where we can't even fund all of this. But we're still trying to commit to an increase to this side of the budget before we address operations, because this is an important side of the budget that we can't neglect. We have a large infrastructure across the town. A lot of that is in our school buildings, and we need to maintain those assets to an appropriate level. And, so it puts stress on the operating side of the budget because we're trying to pool more resources to the capital side of the budget, whether it be facility maintenance, fields, and sewer expansion, and so forth. And so that's another challenge that we have on an annual basis. And so we've increased our general fund contribution to 16.2 million to the capital side of the budget. It started off at 1.9 million many years ago, but we've grown it to 16.2 million over the years. And we've done so by increasing the base by 2.5% a year. Plus, we began to add an additional $750,000 a year for a 5-year period through fiscal year 2027. So we're growing the contribution to that side of the budget through those two mechanisms. And the reason why is because the acceleration of the capital program, whether it's the CWMP or the recent school facility study that we had done last year, we have these growing needs. And so we're trying to address that by putting more money to this side of the budget. But it impacts operations when you do that. Makes less revenue available for the operating side. And this chart illustrates what that growth and that commitment has been in terms of dollars and percentage. We've grown it since fiscal year 14. We were just over $10 million, but now we're up to that 16 million, and we project it to be closer to 20 million by fiscal year 30, with that 2.5% increase plus the $750,000. And from a percentage basis of our tax levy, that's an increase from 10.4% to 11.4% of our tax levy being directed towards the capital side of the budget versus operations. Fund a lot of the capital program. We issue general obligation bonds, as you all well know. We've seen the rates in the general obligation bonds to be very strong over the past 10 years. And then in fiscal year 22, they're starting the increase. And they're going back up to where they were back to 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, and getting closer to 3.5% nowadays. And so when we were enjoying interest rates as early as back to fiscal year 21, just over 1% in our general obligation bonds we were paying. Now they're up to over 3.5%. That dilutes your purchasing power as people see when they're trying to figure out how to pay for a house or how to buy a house. With mortgage rates jumping from 3.5% to 6.5% today for a 30-year mortgage, it decreases the amount that you can buy, and this has the same impact on the town. It decreases the amount of capital that we can fund when our borrowing rates go up. The committee, you've made a point of this in your recent reports on the capital program about our outstanding debt. This chart illustrates what that is over the last 10 or 8 years. Our outstanding debt is represented by the blue color, with the orange color being our authorized and unissued debt. We have a lot of authorized and unissued debt approved by the town council to fund the FY25 capital program. So it's been authorized. We haven't issued it yet, but we plan on issuing it. And when you combine those authorizations with what's outstanding at the end of fiscal year 24, we have total authorized and unissued plus outstanding debt of about $400 million. Now, why is that important? because we have borrowing caps under Mass General Law. We can only borrow up to 2.5% of the town's equalized valuation, or we can only have outstanding at any time 2.5% of the town's equalized valuation, which currently $24 billion. So in terms of outstanding debt, that's just over $1.2 billion is what we could have in outstanding debt. However, our administrative code caps it at 2.5% as opposed to 5% under Mass General Law. And I think our administrative code was drafted at a point in time when the state cap was 2.5%, so we replicated that. And so it still exists in our administrative code, this cap at 2.5%, which is about 600 million, just over 600 million. So we have about a $200 million gap between what we can have outstanding and authorized at any point in time and what the administrative code says. So we're getting closer to that cap. And so I think what we're going to have to do in the next couple of years is go back to the town council, change that administrative code to reflect the state law that would allow that cap to be increased.
Hey, Mark,
yes, go ahead, John.
I presume the numbers that the graphic represents is a factor in a rating agency rating. I mean, I assume that they look at what we do versus what we could do and what we could potentially do, and all that somehow gets involved in the chicken noodle soup that results in an overall rating. And I assume this is favorable, even though you feel like we're going to need to go and change the town administrative code.
Yes, they do look at that at every year, and currently even with this, they consider us to have a manageable debt burden.
Right.
But eventually we'll get to the point where they may think it's unmanageable. But they look at more metrics than what the number is. They look at, per capita income or median family income to see what the debt burden is from that perspective. And so there could come a point where they may think that, since we have so much debt outstanding that they could ding us in our credit rating a little bit by that, or change our outlook from stable to I forget what the term is, but
under review, I think it is.
Yeah, something like that. And so, that could have an impact someday. But what that magic number is that you need to get to, because it involves several different metrics, I don't have that. But yeah, they'll let us know ahead of time, certainly, if they consider this a problem.
Thank you.
Sure. And finally, the last slides here talk about our preliminary general fund projection for FY26. This is our fiscal policy that we've been working our budget on every year. It must be constructed within the limitations of Proposition 2.5, meaning that we can't assume any tax overrides in there. Any remaining new revenue growth after providing for fixed cost increases will get allocated to the school operations and the municipal operations on a 60-40 basis. Fixed costs include funding for the capital program, which I just talked about, will increase 2.5% a year, plus that $750,000 through FY27. We can produce or put together a proposed operating budget that uses general fund reserves or free cash to balance those operating budgets, of course, subject to town council appropriation, which we did in FY25. Any general fund surplus that ends up getting generated from unspent appropriations or actual revenues exceeding budget estimates will get credited back to those municipal and school savings accounts. We'll always maintain a 4% of the general fund operating budget set aside in a reserve fund. That's our town council policy reserve. We never go beyond, or we never tap into that except for in extraordinary purposes. And the current allocation of the general fund free cash or the general fund reserves is set at 11.1 million for municipal savings, 11.3 million for school savings, and 8.5 million in that town council reserve fund. Here's our revenue projections by category for fiscal year 26 versus 25. Property taxes available for operations are projected to increase $5.5 million or 3.7%. Again, that's Prop 2.5 plus a factor for new growth. Other taxes, which include motor vehicle excise, because of that strong growth in motor vehicle excise, we're projecting an increase of 1.3 million in that category. Again, state aid, minimum aid is what we're projecting under Chapter 70. So we're only projecting about 660,000 in state aid. Charges for services, 300,000. Another big increase is fines and penalties. What we're seeing here, this is payments and fees associated with late payments on taxes. That's what fines and penalties is. Majority of that category. There's parking fines in there too, but most of it is interest and other fees that are charged to taxpayers for the late payment on taxes. And we've had very strong performance in this area because of the aggressive tax policy that we've put in place and pursuing outstanding taxes, especially property taxes. And we've been very successful in collecting that, and we continue to see strong growth there. So this allows us to increase that revenue estimate by another $1 million.
Mark, is that should one view the increase in late payments and for property taxes, should that be viewed as a worrying sign that people are more strapped for money and having a hard time paying their taxes?
No. On an annual basis, we collect over 97% of our tax levy in the year it is levied. And so we have a very strong tax collection rate, but that 3% that gets uncollected within the fiscal year gets added to a property owner's tax lien as a subsequent tax lien. Very few new tax titles are levied every single year. It's mostly the same properties continually not paying their taxes. Some are under payment plans, some are not. But Hector, we have people coming in when we send them a letter on an attorney's letterhead as opposed to the town treasurer's letterhead. They're coming in and they're paying off significant tax liens because of that letter coming from an attorney as opposed to the town. And so I don't think there's always going to be people in the community that struggle to pay their taxes, but we work with them. We get them set up on payment plans. We have dozens of them on payment plans. Dozens of them faithfully honor those payment plans and do the best they can. We don't go forward with foreclosure on anybody, especially if they're on a payment plan. We will not do that. Very seldom have we ever gone forward to try to foreclose on anybody. No, I don't think we're not seeing any uptick in the number of
this just reflects increased collections in a nutshell.
Exactly. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And eventually that'll go down. It's going to go in the other direction as we get these people to come in and pay off. So we have to keep an eye on that. Other revenue, the 1.9 million, that's investment income. We did very well with investment income in fiscal year 24 to the point where we can increase that substantially in fiscal year 26. We anticipate to continue even with anticipation in the reduction at the federal level in interest rates, which will impact our ability to generate investment income. We still have capacity to increase our revenue estimate in this area because we had it so low for fiscal year 24 and 25. And so we're increasing that to reflect our anticipation of continuing to generate a growth, or not growth, but the same level or slightly less in investment returns for the general fund. And the reduction you see here in transfers in of 2.8 million, a lot of that is that's all attributable to our there's a few different lines included in here, but one of them is the general fund surplus that we use to balance the operating budget. We're reducing that by $3 million in fiscal year 26. 6 million in FY 25. We're dropping it down to 3 million in FY 26, recognizing that you don't continue to fund your operating budgets or your recurring costs through the use of savings. So we have planned on reducing that by 3 million, and that 3 million we used in FY 25 was for health insurance. We didn't know what the impact was going to be as a result of changing the split from 50-50 to 70-30. And due to timing, we had to use free cash or general fund reserves in anticipating an estimated cost of health insurance with that rate increase. And so we used free cash to fund that because we didn't want to impact our operating budgets. However, with the strong revenue growth that we're experiencing in the general fund, we can now replace that $3 million of general fund surplus with recurring revenue. And that's what we plan on doing in FY26. So instead of $6 million to balance the budget, we're using $3 million. And I still feel comfortable that that's an achievable number or a good number to use, because if FY25 revenues come in like they did in FY24, we're going to generate over $6 million in surplus. We have estimated fixed cost increases to go from $72.9 million to $76.3 million, a $3.3 million increase. And we reduce that from the projected revenue growth of $8.9 million, and we're down to $4.9 million in net revenue available for our operating budgets. And that shakes out to, on a 60-40 split, that equates to $2.9 million of new revenue growth for our school operations and $1.9 million for our municipal operations. And finally, this is the percentage budget increase in the three major categories: municipal, school, fixed cost over the past 10 years. They've averaged 3.5% for the municipal budget, 4% for the school budget, 3.7% for fixed cost, or about 3.7% overall. Fiscal year 23, 24, 25, we've seen some of the largest budget increases on a percentage basis, and that's because of the strong revenue growth, particularly Chapter 78 and local receipts, allowing us to, because we had that additional revenue, we were able to do more for our operating side of the budget and our fixed cost side of the budget, specifically capital program and employee benefits. But now in 26, we're really looking at something closer to the average over the past 10 years, anywhere from 3.5% to 4%. That's because times are coming back into norm. We're getting normal again. No growth, no significant growth in Chapter 78, but minimum aid. And in FY26, when we bump up those local receipt revenue estimates closer to where they were in FY24, it gets us, we're at a point now where we're looking at more historical averages for projected budget increases on a percentage basis than what we saw over the past 3 years. So that was it. That's the presentation to the council that we gave. Again, I also pre-recorded it. You can watch either the pre-recording or the council meeting from last week if you want to see it again.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mark. We asked you for an abbreviated version of your 30-minute presentation. You took about 40 minutes to go through that, and that was very helpful for me, and I suspect for others. It's always helpful to have you talk through this stuff. Anyone have any comments or questions based on Mark's presentation? I for one am going to go review the pre-recorded version and scroll through these pages again. And if I have other questions, Mark, I'll reach out to you. Anyone else have questions or comments?
I won't talk about it now. Maybe I write just a quick email, but that's slide 16 on our override capacity. What I was thinking was, is this a time where we should be considering school, the school needs and some of their capital programs for an override? Is this the time you want to be looking at something like that, investigating it? And I know the hour's late. We don't need to get into a long discussion, but that was my only thought.
I think, Jim, I think you're raising a good point. Something we should perhaps put on the agenda for a future meeting, talk about schools, because, CWMP our shortfalls anticipated for that have receded with the new funding sources, but the schools, according to that report that was issued last year or this year, there's some significant capital spending that they're going to be seeking or they will need in the future. So maybe we should make that an agenda item for a future meeting.
I would agree with that one. That would, I think, be a worthy area of conversation.
And speaking personally, as I'm not that knowledgeable about the school system, so I would learn from that discussion. So, Mark, maybe you could add that to the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, Hector, why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, just emailing me more specifics as to what the topic would be.
Okay. Okay, great. I'll do that. All right. Moving right along, any correspondence from committee members?
Not for me.
Any? Okay. All right, and Mark, any communications from Gareth or yourself?
I've done enough talking. No.
Okay. Okay. And I have no matters that I've not reasonably anticipated. So if there's nothing else to cover, Mark, you're gonna reach out to Lynn Poyant and arrange for a conversation, and I'm happy to go to her office and meet with her and whoever else wants to join. And then you're gonna check the prices for printing 400 and 500 copies of the document. And maybe, Mark, I could ask that once you make the alignment change for the last page, that you could circulate one last Word version of the overview for at least for me to take a look at. But other than that, I think we're good to go on the financial overview. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Great. Second,
Second.
Chris, please call the roll.
Hector,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
and I say yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much, all, and Mark, thank you especially for all your input and for all the detail on the recent presentation.